Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And I don't know what to say about this one. I guess honesty is the best policy, is that I try to think up, good lead-ins for some of these reviews, but I don't have anything for this one. This is just a movie that exists, that I watched, and I'm going to talk about. There's no real interesting segue I can come up with, so I'm not going to try. I'll say this. I decided to watch this one because it had Daisy Ridley in a starring role, and I really like Daisy Ridley. I do. I think she's a very good actor, and she and just about every other castmate of hers from the Disney Star Wars trilogy, I think they all got a raw deal, except for Oscar Isaacs, because he's still in stuff. You still see his name in places. It's, but I feel like all of the other co-stars, these young actors who I'm sure were thrilled when they got the call, and the toxic sludge that is the Star Wars fandom just ate them alive, and none of them deserved that. They had no control over the quality of those movies. And just for the record, I'm off on a tangent here,
but I'm rambling. Anybody want any coffee?
But just to say, The Force Awakens was a by-the-numbers retread of the original. I actually liked The Last Jedi. I think they did something interesting with it, and, the fans chewed it up and spit it out, and then that abomination that was The Rise of Skywalker was J.J. Abrams and the studio attempting to appease those same trolls in human flesh. And it came out as about as well as you can expect. But none of that is the fault of the actors. I think they all did very well. They created interesting characters. It's not really their fault that the filmmakers didn't give them anything fulfilling or interesting to do. So when I see one of them in a film, I'm excited and I want to support it, because I think that they deserve that. They deserve to be more well-known and have better careers than they've had. I can only hope that history is an indicator here, and that in 20 years' time, when the kids who saw these movies when they came out have grown up and have taken control of the fandom, they give these actors the same treatment that they give Hayden Christensen now, and give them some of their due. Again, that's a tangent, but in some ways the tangent is more interesting than reviewing the movie. I feel like this is another one that is going to be a shorter take, because really there's not a whole lot to get into. It's your standard, I would almost call it a direct-to-DVD film, if, direct-to-DVD movies were still a thing, which I guess they kind of are, but nevertheless. Because it's your standard Die Hard knockoff. I will say that it does some more interesting things, but when we get right down to it, you never want to invite comparisons to Die Hard. It's just not a good idea. And, truth be told, any action film that takes place with a gang of terrorists invading a party in a tall skyscraper and a lone person in the wrong place at the wrong time has to come in and save the day are all going to invite comparisons to Die Hard. So maybe we shouldn't do that. But nevertheless, that's what we have. But as I've said multiple times, formulaic stories and stock characters are not necessarily bad things if you do something interesting with them. So, do they do something interesting with this one? Yes and no. Or rather, I should say yes, but the follow-through leaves a lot to be desired. So, what is the setup here? So, our main character is Joe, I think your name is? Yeah, Joe Locke, played by Daisy Ridley, who is a window cleaner. We find out as the film progresses that she was actually in the Army and has Army training, which is why she can go up against heavily armed bad guys. But that part of her backstory is not as important as the fact that she grew up in an abusive house with an autistic brother who was constantly being bullied and beaten by their father. And as a child, she would, to escape the abuse, she would kind of sit out on the high-rise ledge of their apartment overlooking the city. So that's why she doesn't have a fear of heights, and she's kind of good at, wall climbing and parkour kind of stuff. It also instills in her a sense of obligation and a debt that she can't repay to her autistic brother, who, now that they are grown-ups, she is trying to care for, despite not really being able to care for herself. So the main thrust of this story, so this is where they do something interesting. This is where I will give the movie a lot of praise. I like that the fractured relationship this time is not a romantic relationship, but it is a sibling one, and making the older brother autistic, and therefore something that it would be very difficult for a young person who is now a younger sibling who is now kind of in charge and is responsible for taking care of someone with that level of affliction on the spectrum. That is a challenge. So you do feel for both of these characters. First of all, I need to say that Daisy Ridley does an excellent job in this movie because she's a really good actor. But I think also special praise needs to go to the actor playing her brother, a gentleman by the name of Matthew Tuck. This is his first film, his first real acting role. He's not theatrically trained. He's not a professional actor, but he is actually autistic. And apparently when he found out about the movie and the role, he filmed an audition, sent it in, and they cast him. So I think we need to give some props to this film for, first off, for not casting a non-autistic actor to play an autistic character, which is something major motion pictures have a history of doing, to actually giving it to an actor on the spectrum. And I believe that lends a real air of authenticity to the project. One of the things that I was curious about as I was watching this was, is this an accurate depiction of someone on the spectrum? I've worked with and known many people at various places on the spectrum, but it's like saying, is this an accurate portrayal of, an Italian? There are more than one things that make up an Italian. So saying, this may be an authentic recreation of an autistic person from one person's point of view, but it may not be from another person's point of view. It's a very tight rope to walk. I'll say that from my perspective, I think he did very well, not just in that representation, but for being an untrained actor. And I never would have thought it. I was very surprised when I kind of did a quick glance at everybody's resumes and saw that this was the only thing listed. I was like, holy cow, really? Because he's good. and he has a very natural chemistry with Daisy Ridley. They work very well together. You believe that they are brother and sister. And I think the movie did a great job of building that relationship in all of its pitfalls and all of its highs. You see and understand the emotional frustration of both of them. And I think that's really important, and I have a feeling that's something that Matthew Tuck probably brought to the role that maybe wasn't there originally, is in a film like this, you normally see things from the siblings' point of view. Like, for instance, Rain Man, that movie is from Tom Cruise's perspective. And you don't really get to see a lot from Dustin Hoffman's and how he's interpreting things. And this film, I think, does a very good job of creating that balance so that you do see the pressure this puts on him and how hard it is for him to deal with all of this stuff and with her and with everything. You know, it's not just a one-way relationship. There's a part of me that kind of wishes they had done a more serious film with these two actors and this relationship in a more traditional story, and not had to do the action movie thing. I think that would have been quite good, to be honest with you. But for what we have, both these actors do a really, really good job. And I applaud Matthew Tuck not only for being a symbol of representation, but also for giving a damn good performance for a first time for any actor. Honestly, he's in there with a lot of actors who have done a lot of, you know, side characters in theater. You know, this is not a big name cast. You know, there's nobody recognizable in this from, you know, except for Daisy Ridley. Everyone else is kind of maybe, you know, I think I recognize that person from something, but there's no big names. But they're clearly all well-trained, well-seasoned actors. And Matthew Tuck holds his own, and he is in there with them. You would think that he had been at this for a while. So kudos to him. So that's something about the movie I really liked. I would be interested to hear from other representatives of the autistic community what they thought of the performance, how they felt it did. Because I'm always very hesitant to say, oh, this was great representation. I'm not autistic, at least I don't think. So I can't speak for that culture. So I'd love to know. If you're autistic and you've seen this movie, please let us know in the comments what you thought and what you thought of this performance. So that's definitely the strongest aspect of this film, is that relationship. So anyway, got off on another tangent there, but that's okay. At least it was relevant to what we're talking about. So Daisy works for this skyscraper, which is owned by this energy company, owned by these two scumbags, and you know they're scumbags because the film very clearly tells us in every bit of interaction that they are scumbags. That's holding this big party for all of their scumbag investors when the place is, of course, taken over by terrorists. The twist this time is that they are eco-terrorists, and they are there to call out the scumbag company on all of their scumbag dealings. But things go a little off the rails because the original leader of the eco-terrorists is a guy who just wants to get the secrets out. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. He just wants to, you know, let the truth of what they've been doing be known. But he's quickly usurped by the real bad guy who we've met earlier as a a fellow window cleaner and friend of Joe's, and it turns out he's actually the real villain of the piece because he's an extremist eco-terrorist who wants to kill all people, and yeah, it goes in that direction. Here's the problem, okay? It's clear to me that this film was trying to have villains that were morally in the gray area, more relatable villains. I'm going to make the parallel here, and the movie does it itself. Let's make the parallel to Thanos and that idea of too many mouths, not enough resources, so wipe out half the population, and that that level of, you can see where he's coming from, but it's the extremist methods and the lack of morality that make him a villain. This film is trying to do that same thing. And it's so weird to say it, but in a comic book movie where you're trying to create a more interesting villain, that kind of thing works, or at least when it's done well. In this kind of movie, an action film, it doesn't work. It just doesn't frickin' work at all. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I am a product of 80s and 90s action movies. But when it comes to a movie like this, I do not want my villains to be morally complicated. I do not want them to have gray areas or to have any moment where I'm like, they actually have a point. I want my villains to be Tommy Lee Jones from Under Siege and Alan Rickman from Die Hard and whatever the bad guy's name was from Passenger 57. I just want fucking bad guys. I want bad guys. I don't feel bad about the hero taking them out. I don't want that. I don't want a main villain who I'm like, I sympathize with his plight. It's like, no, I want a bad guy who is bad. That's why Hans Gruber is the gold standard for these kind of things, because he was just a bad guy, and even he admits it.
For all your posturing, all your little speeches, you're nothing but a common thief.
I am an exceptional thief, Mrs. McLean, and since I'm moving up to kidnapping, you should be more polite.
Like, trying to make this more morally complicated just muddies the waters, and quite frankly, it leads to the main problem with this movie. There's two main problems. Number one is they don't follow through on any of the quasi-interesting setups that they give us. The main problem, and this will link back into the first, and I'll talk about that here in a second, is that this is an action movie. It is an action movie in which there are no action scenes till the last half hour. This is an hour and a half movie, and the first hour is spent on the villain's plan, establishing the relationship between Daisy and Matthew, which is important. That one I will grant you. But this weird ideology power struggle between the bad guys and our main villain, just going off on his insane rants and evil plan, and our hero is out on a broken forklift for all of that. And we don't get any action sequences till the movie's almost over. I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, how much time does this have left? Are we going to have an action scene? Now, here's the thing. When the action scenes happen, they're pretty good. I like that there is a nice blend of believable action and also some things that are a little bit more choreographed. So you get a nice mix of, Jackie Chan and Bruce Willis in the fight scenes. You get the feeling Daisy Ridley is trained, but she's not like special ops or anything like that. They don't say like she was the greatest soldier of all time, just that she's had training. And we see a nice combination of that. I also like that she uses her smaller stature and her speed in her fighting. It seems to me like they were very clever in how they staged the action sequences and the fight scenes to make use of what a character like this would have come up with on the spur of the moment, given the situation she's in and her own physical strengths and weaknesses. I also like that they create kind of a tag team with her and her brother, who participates in some of the action sequences and does some really believable and fun stuff. His thing is that he's very obsessed with the Avengers, and he carries a Mjolnir with him at all times. That's his thing. And when he finally uses that, he breaks it out. And it's like, all right, good on you. Like I said, the action scenes were good. It's just they were all crammed into this, last chunk of the movie and didn't really have any time to breathe. But here's the worst part. We get to the final boss battle. We get to her going on with our main villain, who has come up with this thing. He's attached bomb vests to all the hostages, and he has a dead man switch on his wrist where if his pulse stops, the bombs go off. All right? Add to that the fact that this guy is so far over the edge and so far into extremist territory that this for him is a suicide mission. He is going to blow up these people no matter what, and himself as well. So you come to the final boss, and you now have a very interesting premise to build a very complex and exciting action sequence on. A villain who doesn't care if he dies versus a hero who has to keep from killing him. Those are some interesting stakes. And the movie does nothing with it. The action scene between the two of them is actually pretty good, but it is over like that. It is done so quickly and resolved so fast. And you're just like, wait, that's it? And yeah, that was it. So not only do they not give this build up any kind of real payoff, but you waste an outstanding stipulation, an outstanding setup, and do nothing with it. It's done. It's yeah, and it feels limp. I don't want to give the impression that this is a terrible movie. It is not a bad movie. I've seen way worse in the past year. I've seen way worse action movies. I just feel like this one had more potential than a lot of other ones that I've seen. And it just didn't do anything with it. This falls into the category of a movie that exists. It's just kind of there. It's not interesting enough to stick in your memory. It doesn't have anything really wrong with it to make you hate it passionately. It's just kind of there. So yeah, as I said, another one of my shorter reviews, but I don't think anyone's complaining about that. So let's wrap this up, because I can't think of anything else to say about this movie. So final grade for Cleaner, I'm giving it a C. C is for Cleaner, and that's good enough for me. And the only thing keeping it from kind of falling further down the rankings is the action scenes, once they happen, are pretty good. A great performance by Daisy Ridley, and an outstanding debut for Matthew Tuck. And that relationship, those two characters, are enough to kind of keep you engaged. And again, I wish that they'd had these two with these characters and this backstory in a more serious, conventional film. I think it would have been quite good, but you got to rate the movie you have, not the one you wish you had. So there you have it. So yeah, you can do a lot worse, but you can also do a lot better. Okay, so that is it for me on this one. So thank you for coming along. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.